Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. One of the biggest games that we're going to see in all of 2024 going down Saturday night. Ohio State going across the country, playing Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks. Now, we're just going to run it back, right? We just took a look at Oregon and their pathway to victory against Ohio State. Now, we're going to take a look at Ohio State's pathway to victory against Oregon. I personally feel like this is the best way to look at this football game where you're looking at two of the best teams in the country, two of the most talented rosters in the country. This game to me feels like what team can take advantage of mismatches most effectively on Saturday night. That's probably who's winning this football game. So we just took a look at Oregon and some potential mismatches that they might have against Ohio State. Now we're going to take a look at it from an Ohio State perspective. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, whether you're an Oregon fan, Ohio State fan, just a college football fan that is familiar with these teams and going to watch Saturday night, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. I think this is such a fascinating football game with not only just a ton of NFL talent on the football field, but you're going to see some really intriguing and fascinating matchups. So I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The amount of support both the Ohio State, the Oregon fans have shown the boys, it's been amazing. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And if you're Ohio State, you're heading on the road to Autzen Stadium, one of the more difficult places to play in all of the sport. You want to play the game on your terms. And I think what's so special for Ohio State is they kind of remind me of what that Georgia team was in 2021, where if you can run the football as good as Ohio State can, and you can play as good of defense as Ohio State can, you can kind of largely control how the game is going to be played. And if you're Ohio State, I mean, this is a lot of people conceptualize Ohio State, especially under Ryan Day, as this dynamic offense that's just going to beat you in a shootout. Like over the last couple of years, this Ohio State defense, they ain't many better defenses that we've seen in the country, and specifically in 2024. I look at this Ohio State defense and say, one, I'm sitting right here through 5 games. It's the number one scoring defense that we see in the country. But more importantly, like it lines up in terms of the talent that you see with this Ohio State team, legitimate NFL talent at all three levels. I think it's the best defense in the country. If you're Ohio State, how do you want to play this football game? I think you want to lean on the run game, control the time possession, and play really good defense. Look, I think Ohio State can win this football game in a shootout. I think they have the weapons to certainly do so. But if you're Oregon, that's probably how they want that game to be played. If you're Ohio State, slowing the game down, leaning on the two of the best running backs that we see in the country, and then leaning on that defense, that's probably how you want it to be played. And again, what's so special about Ohio State is they have the team is constructed in a way where every single time they step on the football field, they can control how the game is played because of what they can do, not only along the line of scrimmage, but specifically on the defensive side of the football. So we're used to seeing in previous years offenses like CJ Stroud or Justin Fields kind of win in some shootout fashions. I would not be surprised if Ohio State comes into Oregon and says, hey, we're going to try to slow this down. We're going to try to run the football really effectively. We're going to try to play good defense. Now, I think a storyline to monitor in this football game is not only do you have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, by far the best running back room that we see in America. I think you're going to see Will Howard get awfully involved with his legs as well. Now, you haven't necessarily seen it throughout the 2024 season. I think that's a different conversation where you look at both Ohio State and Oregon. I promise you that they've been prepping for this football game going back to fall camp, and they've been hiding and not really showing some stuff throughout the first 5 games that we're certainly going to see on the football field on Saturday. And for Ohio State, one of those things I do think will be probably using Will Howard in his legs. That's something that, again, he hasn't been asked to do much with Ohio State, but you go back to his time at Kansas State, this is a big body who's a very good athlete that has a good knack for running the football. I would guess that you see Will Howard get involved with his legs, excuse me, significantly more than what we've seen throughout the first 5 games of the 2024 season. So I think the first thing you want to start with is Ohio State playing the game on their terms. Now you flip over to the defensive side of the football. This is a conversation that we've had a lot with Oregon over the last couple of weeks, and that is Is this Oregon team too reliant on Tez Johnson in the passing attack? I don't necessarily know if they are, but it's certainly a conversation to be had. I mean, you take a look at the target discrepancy that you've seen for Oregon in the passing attack. Tez Johnson, 52 targets on the year. You take a look at the second and third most, it's Trayshawn Holden and Evan Stewart with 23 targets apiece. And so Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden combined have the same amount of targets that Tez Johnson has seen throughout the first 5 games. I mean, it's no secret that Dillon Gabriel is most comfortable going to Tez Johnson in the passing attack. It's a I mean, the chemistry's there. I think we can all see that. I mean, it's an 80% completion percentage when Tez Johnson is targeted. He's gone for almost over 400 yards. That's by far their quarterback wide receiver battery that Oregon wants to do the most. If you're Ohio State, you're at least trying to make Dillon Gabriel show that he can consistently have success going to other playmakers, guys like Evan Stewart. Now, I think the conversation is, look, I think Trayshawn Holden is probably one of the most underrated wide receivers we see in the country. I look at Evan Stewart and say, I think he might be a top 10 wide receiver that we see in the country. These guys are playmakers. But as of right now, throughout the first 5 games, we've seen a pretty heavy reliance on Tez Johnson in the passing attack. Now, you have this conversation about take away Tez Johnson. That's like saying take away Jeremiah Smith. It ain't easy to do. You can say it all you want. It's hard to execute. Offensive coordinator Will Stein, I think, does a phenomenal job using Tez Johnson in so many different ways. I mean, he lines up a ton of different spots on this offense. He finds the matchups that he wants to go attack. What you've seen Oregon have a lot of success with is getting Tez Johnson kind of bunched up into the slot, working on linebackers in zone coverage. And I think Will Stein just says, hey, Tez Johnson, go attack the space where you see this linebacker dropping back in coverage. And there's just not many linebackers that have the athleticism juice to deal with Tez Johnson in space. I think one thing that could benefit Ohio State here is you got a linebacker in Sonny Styles that he's a former safety. He's a former defensive back. He is comfortable operating in coverage, operating in space. So potentially Ohio State has a linebacker that might be a little bit more physically gifted to deal with a guy like Tez Johnson in space. I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup is these Ohio State linebackers dropping back in zone. And how does Tez Johnson and Will Stein try to attack those linebackers? That's something you've seen them do the first 5 games. Can they have that same kind of success against two Ohio State linebackers headlined by Sonny Styles that I think have the athleticism to kind of deal with Tez Johnson? I think the last thing you want to do is get creative with your pass rush. Oregon's offensive line has significantly cleaned it up after that Boise State game. Now they kind of mixed up the offensive line. I think they found their starting 5 that they want to rock with. But let's be frank with Oregon, and Oregon fans would be the first ones to admit this. The times we've seen Oregon struggle is picking up blitzes and picking up stunts in games along the defensive line. I think Oregon's offensive line from a personnel standpoint is very, very good. I think they got 2 tackles that will be playing in the NFL, and Josh Connerly and Johnny Cornelius. That's going to be a fascinating match because you're looking at 2 edge rushers in JTT and Jack Sawyer, 2 offensive tackles, and a Johnny and Josh that are NFL caliber. That's just an NFL football game kind of going on the football field. I know Ohio State can win one-on-one pass rush opportunities, but if you're Jim Knowles, you are trying to exploit and attack the weakness of this Oregon offensive line, and that is the chemistry and communication of this unit. And Boise State had a ton of success running games up front, bringing different blitz packages to attack this Oregon offensive line. Jim Knowles is one of the best in the business at changing the picture and sending guys that offensive linemen just struggle to pick up in pass protection. That's what I'm looking at. Not only the one-on-one matchups, but can Ohio State and Jim Knowles, with how athletic they are all over the football field, get after Oregon in some creative ways with their pass rush? And I think it starts with stunts and games up front. I mean, there just aren't a ton of defensive linemen that can run those stunts and games the way Ohio State can. They just don't have the athletes. You look at Ohio State, guys like Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, they are certainly athletic enough to run some of those games. Can you challenge Oregon's offensive line to pick up some of those stunts and pressures? That's probably the story that if you're Jim Knowles and you're looking at the film, that's how we want to attack this offensive line. And that when you've seen Dillon Gabriel get heated up, he's just not as good of a quarterback. They struggled on offense significantly in pass protection and in general in the first 2 weeks. Now it's gotten better over the last couple of games, but can Ohio State get back to some of that success we've seen teams have against Oregon rushing the passer? Probably the last key for this Ohio State team. Again, this is going to be a phenomenal football game. It just feels like one of those games that's going to come down to not only what team makes the plays in the big moments, but I think more importantly, what team is able to utilize and attack the matchups that favor them. And there is no doubt in my mind that both of these programs have spent weeks prepping for this football game. I mean, they both haven't, Oregon got tested a little bit early against a team like Boise State that I don't think they were expected to get tested with. Ohio State's kind of been cruising. I think both of these teams have been prepping for this game for a very long time. I think we're going to see a lot of different things from both of these football teams. It's going to be a chess match. It's two juggernauts going head to head. I'm fired up for it. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.